Hello world, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to start off with some of the basics. What are the basics? Like variables. What is HTML? What is CSS? So we're going to cover all of these basics. So we have a browser here, and we go to a web address, and then we get something back like "Hello world," but it's not really a website. It's not really anything. It's just some text. Using HTML, we're able to mark this up to make it something else. So this is very invalid HTML because we don't have our document body or any of that. But this should render because the browser knows what to do with this B tag. The B tag means bold. So anything inside of this opening and closing tag should be bold. So if we save it and then we go back and try it again, we get bold font. So the browser renders the HTML inside of the document. We don't get to see this part because it's removed when it gets to the browser because it knows what to do with it. Now, the browser deals with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. On the back end, the server side, where we're programming and where we have our Lucee web service, if we go to our task manager, we can find that real quick. We have our Lucee web server. So this is what deals with the Coldfusion. So it's interpreted and processed on the server. So it's a bit different from this because our file extension is .cfm. We have registered. Well, this is registered inside of our web server to serve our Coldfusion pages, and the renderer would be the Coldfusion engine. Now let's say if we wanted to make a new file and we called it index.html. So first, index is like a keyword for web servers. So you'll see this a lot, index.asp, any of the other languages and stuff. Um, you're going to see that. Or it could be like default.cs as an example. Um, so there's different formats and stuff, but basically the extension is, well, how do we handle this? How do we render this? Well, inside of this index file, it's going to run through a Coldfusion engine. In this index file, it's not going through any engine. It's only being returned to the browser. So we can test this out by going to index.html inside of our browser. All we got to do is change the extension. So we're on a Coldfusion page, and then we're on an HTML page. So why is that have any kind of significance? Well, in Coldfusion, you have other tags, and we're doing tag based in this tutorial. There is also Coldfusion scripting. We might touch on that a little bit in the future, but for the most part, it's just going to be tag based tutorials. Um, so when you start a Coldfusion tag, more than likely it's going to start with this CF and then whatever. So CF output. Well, there's variables and there's other things inside of Coldfusion. We might want to output it. Um, and doing that, we would get something like this. So we're going to go through an example here, and this is setting a variable. So let's say we wanted to set x equals to 5. And I think there's a, if yours does something like that where it auto closes, there is a auto close extension possibly. It is possible to get it set up to where it doesn't do that. So, um, because there's different types of tags, like this one, this is called a self closing tag. So you don't have to actually type out the closing. It's self closing, which means it's already completed. We set a variable to x. So inside of memory, uh, x is going to equal to the number 5. And then inside of the output, you would be able to do something like this, where you're telling it, hey, prepare output. I'm going to print out a variable. And then the hashtags say, I want to print out the variable x. And we set x right here. So what would you expect to see right here? You would expect to see 5. So like you could do like the old early algebra. So because these are not in hashtags, this is the literal string 5 plus whatever. This is a variable output equals 10. So the old school algebra statement would be 5 plus x interprets into 5, so 5 plus 5 equals 10. That's what we would expect to see as our output. And so if we save it and we run this, we did this inside of an HTML file. It's not going to render because it's going to see this as text. That's all that it did, was it outputted text, because HTML is not capable of rendering our language, which is Coldfusion. So that's just the important thing to know, especially if you're working with different files and stuff and you're like, why is this not outputting? Well, the reason why is because you have to use the correct languages where you're going to use them. So you can't really mix Coldfusion into HTML as an extension, because that's not going to work. But we can also use Coldfusion and mix everything that we want to. So now we're going to cut our code from the HTML, put it into the CFM, save it, and then we're going to go back to the CFM in the browser. Now, it did interpret it, and it changed our value. So this is the rendered HTML that the browser received from the server. So this is just a simplified example, just like on your computer, PDF files, they're associated with programs that know what to do with that PDF document. And this is no different. So we're writing Coldfusion in Coldfusion files, and because we're using that back end, we're not going to be so concerned with any HTML files. So we're going to delete this HTML file back off of here. Keep our Coldfusion file, and then we're going to make us a new folder, and we're going to call it parser. So what we're going to do is we're going to play around with Coldfusion and learn little bit about variables while creating our own little parser to kind of interpret something that we want to do. So let's create a new Index.cfm file. What we want to do is set up the foundation for our little program, our little parser. So I'm calling it a parser because we're making it more like a parser, but the concept behind it is um, lexing. Lexing is where the language is tokenized and matched up against keywords and stuff, and performs actions. We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to grab our data a little bit different for this example. So we need some variables. The first variable we need is one that's going to hold our block of text, like our command. We're writing our own kind of programming language, or maybe a renderer or something like that. So we need to be able to store our variable. So I can't say something like just right here. I can't do if x equals 1, uh, blah blah. I was typing blah blah there. Okay, so we can't do anything with this. It's just text. It's text in a file. It's not in memory. You know, memory being where the computer has access to it. Right now, nothing has access to this. So what we need is a variable. Well, we could do this two ways to make a string. We could do cf set um, command equals this. So now our string is in a place we can access it through the variable called command. We can call it whatever we want. It's a variable. So it's for us to understand. Sometimes naming things can be difficult, but it's better to take a second, think about a good name. Is command appropriate for this one? Because basically what we're doing is we're wanting a place that's kind of like our CFM file, to where we can write some code like this and then write a little tiny program that can do something with it. So that's what we're doing. Is command correct? Um, Maybe not. Maybe it's statement. So that's our programming statement. So that feels a little bit better. So we have this string. There's another way to do this, and it's probably the one that I would say would look better, because so we can do a cf save content, and we give it the variable name statement, and then we have a block of text. So now we can write it similar to what we were doing before, and statement is still going to be equal to the contents of this, the inner contents of this tag, cf save content. Now, when we create variables, if we want to debug them, because we can go to the browser right now, we need to go to parser and then index.cfm. So we're going to replace hello world here, and we can leave the index.cfm because it's still the same. I'm going to type in parser, go to this, and what I expect is a blank white page, because we're not outputting anything. We're setting a variable to something, but we're not outputting it. So there is no output. Now, if we want to see the output, we have to do a cf output with a close tag, our double hashtags, and then we put our variable name. Our variable name is statement. So when we save this, we're going to get this output. Okay. But this doesn't actually get interpreted. This is just a string. This is a string that we're setting. So in order for us to manipulate this and do things with it, we need to come up with a little bit of a structure. Maybe we don't want to make it so complex. Like we're not making a full programming language. We're just kind of scripting and playing around with parsing. So let's say if we wanted to make a function called like bold, and then okay, so the way this is going to be interpreted is right there like that. Let's say if this is a method call bold. We want this to be bold and output like that. Well, how can we do that? Well, we know what we want to do. We program it. So we have our statement here. So we can add a comment. Comments are good to make sure you know like what each section, what each section of your file does. So right here, we're defining our statement. Right here, what we want to do is generate our output. And then down here, we're actually outputting our output. So now that we have statement as a variable, we need to take off bold and actually make hello world bold. Here is we're going to do a CF set statement because we want to replace it with what we're doing. And then we're going to do as a regular expression replace. So there's online tools for regular expression. It's its own language, pretty much. I mean, there's so much to it, but for a regular expression, you're matching patterns. So we're able to say find bold with an open bracket and a close bracket, and then get me the contents that are inside of it. And then when we get the contents that are inside of it, we can rewrite it to what we're actually wanting. So we need our string, which is the variable statement. Now this is a variable versus a statement is a string. We defined it, and it is a string. The same thing as this is a string. So we put double quotes around our string. You can also do single quotes in Coldfusion. I often use the opposite if I have to escape a character. Escaping, as in, if this was, you know, belonging to, see how the format messes up. So you got this red color, and then now this is blue. It's because it's not escaped. Let's see. I gotta look that one up. So in strings, when you're using specific characters, there's something called escaping, and I wanted to show you why I do the opposite of whenever possible. Um, so let's see. We're looking here in real time. So is it itself again? Okay, yep. So that's why. If I were gonna do this, I would rather do double quotes on the outside, and then you don't have to escape it. You can just leave it like that. So that's just a future thing. It will come up quite often because of having to escape things, which also kind of goes back to this format when you got block text where you're writing sentences and stuff. I would prefer this way over, you know, the string variable in those cases. But I wanted to show this is a string as well as statement. The variable is also a string. Now, when you're using something like VS Code, where it has IntelliSense because of our extension that we installed, you're going to get little hints like this as you're typing in the code, which will kind of tell you what you're trying to populate in here. So we're doing a regular expression replace on statement, or regular expression that we got to write, um, the replacement string, and then the scope. So in this case, the way that scope works is if you imagine there's thousands of words and thousands of commands. If you specify one, so there's two ways to use this. There's one and there's all. It's only going to replace the first occurrence, which in our case wouldn't be good because if we're writing bold for multiple things, we want bold for those multiple things. So we would want all as our scope. So we're replacing all. Okay, so this is our regular expression. What is our regular expression? There are online websites. I think I'm gonna see if I can remember this off the top of my head. Yeah, I think it's this one that I used to use. So in this case, you can go here and you can type in your test string. And what we're wanting is we're wanting to be able to get this. So you do have to escape inside of regular expression. The escape character being the backslash, because if you don't escape it, it interprets. There's a different interpretation for this, which is part of grouping for regular expression. I know this is throwing a lot out there because regular expression, like I say, is something all of its own. There's a lot of different things, but this is kind of like a crash course into how interpreters do kind of work, and trying to um, help you understand that side of it. So I know we're getting bogged down with regular expression a little bit, but this is a good starting place for this because you're probably always going to be using some form of regular expression throughout any type of long term programming. So anyway, we're matching bold right now, and then we want to do a capture um, up to our next um, closing parenthesis, which we have to escape as well. Now we're matching, which is good, but we actually want a capture group. So I believe this is where the parenthesis, the actual usage of parentheses comes in. So we're capturing using parentheses that we're not escaping. So our group comes back as hello world. Okay. So so this is our regular expression that we're wanting. This regular expression is going to, oh, we have to do one more thing here because I only copied the command. If we had other text here like um, this would not match because there's other text here and we're looking specifically for bold starting. I believe that's the case. But anyway, we're gonna do this. We're gonna put a dot star, which means match anything. So we're only finding our bold places in all of the text. So we're gonna save this, and then here's the second part to this. So this is a capture group inside a regular expression. We have access to this capture group by saying, if this was the first capture, if we had other parenthesis groups inside of our regular expression, like we were doing something more complex, the second capture would be $2, $3, and so on. But $1 at this point in time is going to be equal to a string of hello world. Now, we know a little bit about HTML already, which we know the bold tag. So, what we're doing is we're trying to find and replace. So, we're going to replace this from statement. We're going to find these cases and we're going to replace them with this set of string. And then we're going to output it, which at this point in time, it should be HTML. Um, it'll look like this with hello world in it, get returned to the browser, and show up as bold. So let's see what we end up with. Okay, it didn't work. The capture group didn't work. So let's go look up this command. So remember regex 101 might be a good time to bookmark that. Another one that we're getting ready to go to is when I search commands, I always include Lucee because there's other versions of Coldfusion. Lucee is what we're developing off of, so we want to find this one, the Lucee documentation. Okay, so we're going down through here. Um, the replacement. So we're interested in the replacement. Okay, let's include back reference. Okay, so here's the so this one is from Adobe themselves. The languages are real close. Um, I mean, they're the exact same language, but they have different functionalities. So I normally try to stick with Lucee, but let's see if we get a little bit better luck here on this one. Okay, so maybe it's not dollar sign, it's backslash or yeah. Okay, well let's just try it and see. It's easy enough to replace one character. Okay, that was the case. So it's not dollar sign, it's backslash and then the number that it references. So in this way, we can use bold. Okay, so we're running into a second issue. So maybe I was incorrect about the everything part. Let's see. Yep. Okay. So in this case, I messed up with the saying include everything as part of our replace. We wouldn't want to do that. It would only be the statement. If we wanted to create more commands, we could. I mean, we could copy this line and add in other cases like underline and so as a simple example, this is parsing, and the concept behind this is kind of showing what it is that we're doing. We're taking a language and writing it like we have here on line 3. We're writing in this language, and behind the scenes there's there's programming that performs the actions that we're asking for. And in addition to that, we also can make some of our own. So we're going to be doing all of that. But as a second part of this project, and I know this was a little bit more of an advanced example, but just kind of throwing you right in there, and hopefully you're figuring it out as we're going along. We're going to do one more little project here for our actual projects. So we're going to get back into our project root and we're going to do a new file and we're going to do Index.cfm right here. So this is the root level of our website. Now, if you remember, we started off kind of being inside of a Hello World project and then we backed up a level so that way we can store all of our projects underneath of one Git repository. So this index file didn't exist, but now we're going to have one. And it's CFM, which means that it's a part of the Coldfusion parsing. We're going to make a index file or web a web page that's going to list all of our subfolder projects so that way we can have easy navigation around our projects for our learning environment. So let's get started. So we're on a blank page, and we're going to go to our browser and make sure that we're trying to get to this blank page that we're seeing. We do that by removing this middle part, which is currently on parser, and we land here on the page that we're looking at inside of VS Code, which is our index. So we can close out these other ones. We got 3 indexes up here, so it might kind of get a little bit confusing, but we only want this one open at the root level of our project. So there's a couple of things that we have to do. First, let's make a comment. We're going to pseudo code this out a little bit. And by that, I just mean to use English terms to define what we're doing. So that way it kind of gives us a document for our program that we can kind of follow. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get our directories. So we need to get the directories into a variable, because there's going to be more than one. There's more than one directory, and there's going to be more in the future. That means that the variable that we get, well, getting the directories, I already know this, so I'll tell you, but it returns a format of a query. So with a query, it's kind of like a database query. So you can use a querying language like SQL and be able to select from this list. So we're going to get a query back, but we need to loop over each one. Loop over directories, and then we need to generate output for each directory, and this is going to be a HTML anchor tag, or I call it the A tag, anchor tag, but that's a link. It's a link tag, is what it is. So we're going to get our directories, loop over our directories, and then generate output back to our browser. And then from the browser, we will be able to click on a link, and it'll take us into that project. So how are we going to do this? There's a couple of different commands here in Coldfusion. So we want to do a CF directory action is list, and then there's a bunch of different. If you push inside of VS Code, if you push space, and then you use your control key plus space, it'll pop up with this uh, IntelliSense window. And because of our plugin that we have, it knows that CF directory can have these additional attributes. So some of these I know off the top of my head because I've worked with it before. So action equals list, and then the directory is where we're wanting to list it from, and then the name is the variable that we get back. So we're going to call this, we're going to give it the name directory query, because we know that CF directory returns queries. So we're just going to give it a simple name to make it easy for us to understand what is inside of this variable. Well, it's the directory query. And the directory itself is going to be a Coldfusion command, expand path, and we're going to give it the dot. So what this is going to do is use our current directory, which is the dot, and we're going to find our path to the current directory. So this file is inside of C projects, and it's the Index.cfm. So the directory returned for this file is going to be C projects. And then it's going to loop over that directory, which is going to give us hello world and parser as our projects. So part of debugging is trying to get the output. Now, earlier we were doing CF output. Now this works, but you can't do this with complex variables. What do I mean by complex variables? Well, the number one is a simple variable. A string value is a simple variable. But something like this, where you have multiple pieces of data inside of one variable. This is a complex variable. You cannot just output. So our query is inside of this variable called directory query. We can't do this because it can't output a complex variable. It won't work. Actually, let's try it. I'm pretty sure that we'll get an error message. So cf out, got to spell it correctly, output. So we're going to rerun this. Okay, so we didn't get anything. It's like, okay, well, whatever. Oh no, there it is. Okay, so yeah, can't cast complex object to string. So it doesn't like it. You can't do it. But there's another way that we can do this, and it's the dump tag. So we're going to do a cf dump var, and then we're going to give it the same hashtags because it's a variable. Directory query is the name. It's a self-closing tag, so all we have to do is that, and then we need to remove these couple of lines of code because these are causing an error in our program. So now we're going to be able to dump a complex variable out to our window. So the dump, another thing with it is that it generates the HTML to show it. So it is an output tag itself. So when we dump that out, so we can see here that this is why it's complex. It has a name, a size, a type, all this. Type is what we're interested in. We don't want to show .get. We do want to show hello world and parser though. So there's a couple of things that we're going to do. We're going to do a condition check to make sure that um, that it's a directory. It looks like there's these attributes, so I'm assuming that H is hidden. So we can use this. We don't want to show any hidden um, directories, but we do want to show these other ones. So let's go in here and start working on this. So we dump this out. So now we know what directory query is. And we also know that it's a query. So if we want to loop this, we got a command for that. CF loop. Now there's a couple of different versions of your loop that you can do with different data types. So you got an array. You have a collection. You have a from and to. You have a condition check. So there's various types of loops. This type is a query. So we're going to loop cf loop query. Directory query. And in this case, and this is a rare case that you wouldn't do this, because this is a query and because we're looping a query, we wouldn't actually output the variable inside of there. However, and this is one of the funny things, if you were to do loop an array, you would still have to include the hashtags because it is a variable. Query, don't have to. Anything else, you have to. It's that's caught me up before. I'm just it's a tip. Okay, anyway, so we're gonna loop this query. So the way that the loop works is it's gonna go line one, line two, line three. It's gonna go over. So when in my first iteration, I'm gonna have this, and I only have access to that to the columns. So what that means is that directory query dot name, directory query dot size. That's how I get this value. The first time it's going to be this row. The second time it's going to be this row. And so it's looping over those. So I'm wanting to output HTML because this is a CFM document. It knows how to interpret this Cold Fusion, but I'm also allowed to output HTML from this document. And when it returns to the browser, it's going to render as HTML. So we're generating HTML from dynamic or variable values. And these variables came from our project structure, from where we have these folders. Uh, so these are our variables. So we're going to loop this, and we're creating an HTML tag. The ahref equals. So this part is what's going to start getting dynamic with our variable usages. So the first thing we need to do is we need a condition check. So if cff, so we don't want to include anything that has an attribute with the value of an h inside of it. Now the thing is this looks like a string. It's probably a string, so it could be like HIT, like whatever these other values are. H is probably unique, but it's a string value. So we have to do a check inside of a string. So we're going to do a CFIF. Um, we're going to do a find no case. And the name of this column is attributes. So we're going to do CF directory query dot attributes. So we have this find no case. If we hover over it, it's so we need to find our substring is the first parameter, and then our string is the second parameter. So H. Now we put find no case, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just putting a capital here. I don't know if there could be a situation where the H is lowercase. So if there's an H, I don't want it. I'm going to go ahead and close up this this tag, and that's another thing that you should try to get in the habit of. And I know I complained about it earlier. The auto close tags. It's auto close tags is kind of cool when I guess it's closing the right tags like a CFIF. You need a closing tag. A CF loop. You need a closing tag. This directory you don't. But the important thing is that you have one, because say if you don't have one, so I have an opening CFIF, but the program, Coldfusion itself, doesn't know where to close this tag. So if I come back over to the browser and I refresh, I'm going to get an error message this time. See, so the start and end tag are not the same, and it's kind of comparing the the CF if to the next closing tag, which is a CF loop, and that's not valid. That's not valid cold fusion. So it also tells you, so error messages, um, don't look at them as a bad thing. Like, there's a lot of data here, and you're going to have a lot of errors. So when you can get this much data with an issue, I mean, it's actually a good thing. So this is telling us on line 14 of our index file, we have an issue. So this shows us our opening tag, and then we can look and be like, okay, we got our CF loop. Okay, yeah, we don't have a closing CF if. So now we can fix that problem. So it's not, error messages are not a bad thing, but do try to remember to close your tags as you go along, because when you miss them, this is a simple example, but if you imagine there was 1,000 lines in this file and you were getting an error message like that, it takes a little bit of time to go and correct that when it's very simple. Anyway, that's my soapbox. So we're outputting variables here. So these variables are coming from our directory query. So in our first case, it's going to go through and loop. Okay, we don't have our output for that dump yet, but it's going to go through and loop, and we know the first one has an H. So we also have to fix this. So when it returns a numeric number, 0 being it's not found, and any other number being it was found. So if it's greater than 0, or actually we want to, if it equals 0, so we didn't find the H, then we want to move on. So moving on, um, we have our base directory. Try to get back here. So this is our root. So we're at the root level right here. We want this page to have our projects as links that we can click on, and they'll navigate into that project. Um, so right here, what we're wanting to do is output a forward slash. So this is mixing string. So remember, this part right here, this is HTML. Hashtags is cold fusion in this context. So this is the string tag for HTML, and we're wanting to dynamically put on our directory query dot name, and then we want to do the same over here. Now this is not lighting up as I would expect, using the plugin and being a little more familiar with it and stuff. We're actually missing an output tag. So there's different ways to do this. Say if this document, if this was the only output that you had, you could leave the output to wrap right around here. But if you're going to be outputting more data, it might be better to put your output around everything, which is what we're going to do. I'm just going to put the output around everything in here, and then we don't have to worry about it anymore inside of our learning environment for this file. So if you notice, the colors changed, so you can see where you have your red double quote, and it's red right here again. Um, that's good. You'll, as you work with these documents and languages and stuff, you're going to notice these kind of things also. That if you did have a break where I didn't have my closing double quote right here, you notice these other things change colors, and it's like, oh, okay, well, what's going on here? Let's try to figure this out. So this should be figured out. So let's, as a test, let's just go back and see. So I'm expecting to see a couple of, actually, yeah. So it's thinking right now. Okay, so we got a little bit closer, but we need to also limit this. So we don't want it to be hidden, but we also need the type to be, um, so we're going to say and. So the attribute doesn't have an H, and the type equals dir. Now let's refresh it. Okay, there we go. So now we get our links. And if we hover over them down here at the bottom left, we can see that just goes to the folder hello world, and that goes to our folder parser. So if we click on it, see it takes us into our parser project. We go back, go to hello world, takes us in hello world project. So easy enough, simple navigation for, you know, a simple program. But we can style this up a little bit more. So as I said, this is kind of like the, so a CFM. We can have HTML inside of our CFM file, uh, and that's what this line right here is. This line with the Coldfusion variables. Other than that, the rest of this is Coldfusion. But what we can do is we can add in our HTML to this. So it's been a while. Let's go over to, do our research here. So we're all that we're wanting is a simple HTML document, and I know that HTML documents have a doc type. So this is where I want to start at, is the doc type, to get me an example. Um, just a quick HTML example. And W3 schools, this one's an awesome one. I would bookmark this, and as you can see, there's the HTML section right here, CSS. It also has JavaScript, pretty much everything you can think of. But when you come down, you have the different. So if you see here, it has a lot of information, and it has all these HTML tags over here on this left hand side. Right here is the a link. You can see. So as a rough example, like this right here, this is an HTML document. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this code out of here, and we're going to take it over and paste it into our index file that we're working on. We're going to paste it right here above this, but after our comments. Okay, so for our title, we're just going to give it a title of learning. And then right here, this part, the closing tags on this section, so body and HTML, we want to cut those closing tags from here. Get rid of this example content, and then we're going to paste our closing tags down here at the end. Now, another thing we're going to do, and this kind of goes along with, you may have noticed it already with the tabs. When you nest tags, you want to tab them in. So any kind of nesting that you have with tags. So here's the closing HTML tag. Here's the opening. So I want to grab everything from within there and tab it in. And then the same for the head section, tab that in, and then the same for the body section, tab that in. Okay, so this gives us our HTML document that the browser can render. So, as an example, this title right here will be the name on our tab. So, right now, our tab shouldn't have a name because we have not given it any kind of instruction. It just has the URL up here that we went to. But if we were to refresh this, and now we get learning on our tab up here. So we provided a little bit of instruction to the browser to say, okay, well, set our tab to this. There's other tags and other things for metadata. So if you ever heard of a search engine optimization specialist, this is a lot of what they do is right here inside of these meta tags here. So you got title, you have uh, another tag here for keywords, another tag for site description, all this stuff. So there's a lot of different tags in HTML. There's a lot of different ways to use the tags, but this is a standard HTML document, and then we're outputting this. So another thing that we can do. So this is all HTML. Now, what the browser can do, the browser knows how to work with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So HTML is your HTML document, which is kind of like your design, your layout. Then the CSS is your style. So that gives you your colors, your widths for each section, things like that. And then you have your JavaScript, which makes your web page or website interactive. So you can click on buttons and perform different actions. So those are the three parts of the web browser. And you can include all of those into one HTML document. So right here, what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of style to our document. Now, this would be considered internal CSS. So, internal means that you're including it inside of your document, as in the head section right here. Inline would be if you added CSS styling directly onto an HTML element. And then you have external, which we're not doing right now, but you can actually link to it and bring it in as a separate document itself, as a .css file. But in this case, we're not doing that. What we are going to do is try to add a little bit more HTML markup over here onto our links. So what I envision is that we have these two projects, but I kind of want them over here in the center of the screen, going from top to bottom. So how do we do that? Well, we have body and we have the A right here, but there's different tags. So we could do a div tag, which would make sure that each one of these came down onto its own row. And div is kind of like a container that by default, a div is a container that would stretch across the entire width of the page. By including these into their own separate divs, it'll force this second one down onto its own line. Now, we can check this out because browsers have development tools for us to use. So we can right click the background and click on inspect. This is going to open up our development toolbar. This toolbar, you can open it up other ways. You got the little hamburger menu up here. You can also use like F12. You're going to use this tool quite a bit as well. Specifically, the inspector tool, the console tool, and the network tool. So, as an example here, just covering the network, we can see our traffic. So we went to this page. It provided these headers, this request, which we're not completing a form field, so there is no real data, with this response. And then we can see our response right here, or in the raw, we can see our HTML document and our Coldfusion generated HTML right here with these div containers. And then we can also go over here to inspector, click this little icon over here on this left, which gives us our selection tool. And we can see right there's that div container, which expands 100% across the screen, and hover over the next one, and there it is, a div container all the way across the screen. See? So we have these containers. Now what we want to do is we want them to be center aligned. We want the font to be in the center. So how do we do that? Well, we can add styles. There's different types of styles and different ways to target our elements on the page. So what I mean by that. So again, this part right here, this is all the HTML that we have right now. Well, I'm sorry. We do have we have this HTML, and this. But this is really all that we're outputting on the screen right now. The rest of this is Coldfusion. Okay? So we're not working with too much. We have a div tag, an a tag. So we can do things by targeting these elements themselves by saying div. So this inside of a style or a style sheet, when you're trying to target, you have to find a way to be able to access these things on the page to say that I want this thing to do this specific thing. Now, when you do it like this as an element, if I wanted to add another div down here for my footer, well, because I targeted these ones, it's going to do it to all of them. And maybe I don't want that. I don't. Well, I already know that I don't want that, but it could be that um, there could be some cases where you do want this. Uh, in particular, one of the ones that I kind of go to, the star element, which is everything. So this is saying everything. I want everything to work like this. Uh, and you can give it a padding of 0 and a margin of 0. So I kind of like doing this because let's go back to our browser here. Let me just show you something. So there's built in paddings and stuff on some of these elements. So you see where this is. If you look at the top left here of this box, you'll notice there's white space. There's white space above this and to the left of it. And when I hover over this div, it doesn't go all the way to the right hand side of the screen. So there's margin and padding on these elements um, that I don't want. So I can use the star. Now let's save this and refresh it. Now you see it pushed that H up to the top left corner. So now I'm more in control of my own padding. So looking at this, um, what I really want is I want these A links to be centered, but I only want it for um, a link container. Like we can give it a name. So there's two other ways that we're going to target. The first one is the ID attribute. The ID attribute means this is unique for the entire page. A lot of people do not use IDs because of this. Because, say, if you mess something up, or say you style something, and what if I started off and this was only one link? And then I added more links in the future. Well, now I have to go back and I have to remove ID because now it's not you, the unique thing. Like with footer, there should only be one footer. We could give this an ID of footer. Uh, Now, the other side of that is giving it a class. Now, you could do the same thing with footer. I mean, you're not giving anything else the class for footer, but you ensure now that you know ID is not being used somewhere else. What if you have a nav footer? What if you have this footer? So you could use classes to identify it. So in either case, let's do both here. So we know that footer is never going to have another. So we're giving it an ID of footer, and we're going to give it a class of footer because that doesn't hurt anything. We can have it. We don't have to have it. It could be like this, because it is unique. We're using one. We're using class for this because there's more than one. It doesn't technically matter as long as we know how to target it, and also as long as we know the rules. Like you don't want to give ID to more elements on the page. So we're going to call this a project link. So it has a class of project link. So let's style this. So we can grab by the element itself. We can grab by an ID. So we're going to do that now. Um, you're going to do a hashtag, single hashtag, because it's not Coldfusion footer. So hashtag means ID. So that's this ID of footer. ID equals footer. So this style targets this div container. So now we went from being able to select, or having something that would select everything and style everything based off of the element. Well, now we're using an attribute. We're using the ID attribute with the value of footer. So let's do something with this now that we have it targeted. So let's just give it a color of red, which means the font color should turn red. We're also going to target by class for this project link. So class is a period. So period or class project link. Anything with the class project link is going to use this style. Now, what is this style? This is a div tag and it contains an A tag. So if we come back over here and look, so that way we can understand the difference, the div tag by default is going to expand across the entire page, pushing the next item down, which is good because that's what we wanted. And then you have the A tag right here. So if we hover over this div, you can see it's the entire page. The A tag, tiny little box. It's a tiny little box over here. So what we're wanting to do is take this tiny little box and float it to the middle. And we can do this, should be able to do this with, oh, with the style text align center. And it kind of jumped around there a little bit. So text align center. So just like with anything else, like I want to really stress, don't try to remember all of the syntax. Just remember the rules and remember how to get the syntax. So in this case, when you're like targeting elements and uh, classes and IDs, um, just like with the W3 schools, it had an HTML section. It also has a CSS section. So say you want to do something. I want font to be bold. Well, you can do that with font weight, and over time, you'll you'll learn how to do this because this is something that you will constantly be doing when you're building a website. You're constantly adding styles because if you didn't add styles, you'd end up with something like this where everything's on the left hand side of the page. In order to style it, you add in the CSS to style your HTML. So we saved it. Let's go refresh it and see where we're sitting at as far as our vision goes with wanting to get things over here in the center and push things down a little bit. Okay, so we're centered and we made our footer red. Okay, so we're adding styles and applying it to the correct elements to get the results that we want. And we keep, keep working with it. So our project link. So what's another thing we want? Maybe we want the font size to be a little bit bigger. So we'll do 18 pixels on our font size. And we also want a margin of a margin top of 5 pixels. This ensures proper white spacing between each one of our items. And let's see what we got from this. Okay, so we made our font size a little bit bigger, and because these are links, there's also another thing that you should know, which is the pseudo selector. The pseudo selector. So this is an A tag. So we're going to select by element. So we're going to use A, but the pseudo selector would be adding a colon, and then we can target different states. So there's 4 states of a link. There's the active. We're going to copy this because we're going to. There's hover. There's selected, And then that's the other one. It's link. So you can chain multiple styles if you want the same style with a comma afterward. So it's saying do this and do this one and do this one. So you can target multiple elements. So this last one is link, and what's the purpose of doing this? Well, you can style these individually. Say if you hover over a link, and you want the color to turn red when you do that, you can you can do that with these different different styles. So we'll add that as an example so we can check it out. So if we hover over it, we want the color to turn to red, and then there should be one text decoration. The text decoration to be none. We'll give it a black font, and we're also going to include this text decoration none down here on this hover class because it won't be, it's not up here to get this one now. So we'll have to duplicate that. We could move this back up here so that way it picks up all the styles and then we're reapplying so it would actually make the color black and then immediately after it would make the color red. We could do it that way, but I think we'll just stick to what we got here and let's go test it and see how we're looking now. Now, me personally, I think I like the thought of having all capital letters for our projects. Um, so we'll take a look at doing that as well. Now, okay, I had a minor issue. Had to restart the computer, locked up. So we were looking at the A link here. So selected is not correct. So there's active, visited, A link, and hover. So we'll go ahead and fix that and save it. And one of the things over here back in the browser, pulling up the dev tools here again, is on the console. So there's these different selectors here. So see CSS is off, click it, CSS is on. So this lets me know there's no pseudo class with the name selected. So that's probably why our styles are not getting picked up on it because there's actually a CSS error here. Um, so that's kind of where we're at. So we fix that. Now we're going to refresh our page here, make sure that our styles do get applied. Okay, so the styles do get applied because we got our black text. It's not text decorated. We got our parser, our hello world, and we got this web.inf folder now. And we don't want this one to show either. So let's go back over here and inside of our conditions where we're checking, we're going to use another case here. So we're going to find no case INF inside of our name. We could do the whole thing, web INF. Um, okay, so now let's go refresh it. Make sure that that one goes away. Yep, good. Okay, so this is looking a lot better. So we got our links. We got our little footer over here. Um, that was kind of a placeholder just to show that we don't want to style every single one of these the same way. But for now, we can go ahead and get rid of the footer. Okay, easy enough. So now, whenever we add new projects, we'll be able to get them to show up here. So that's pretty much the two things that we wanted to cover in this one. So we're playing around with some HTML, CSS, and Cold Fusion by using our project directories as our projects here, so that way we can easily navigate around our learning environment as we add more to it. So, in addition to that, we also kind of talked about uh, how parsing, how we render, and the different reasons for HTML and CSS and Cold Fusion. All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to leave some comments down below, and we'll get back to you. And in the meantime, I look forward to you guys on the next video. All right, thank you.